Blessings, beloveds. Welcome back, Anastasia, Cosmic Astrologer. Let's talk about the new moon in Scorpio coming up in just a couple of days' time. Before I bring up the chart for that and just share some of my own perspectives and insights, I just want to say regarding astrology classes with me, thank you to those of you who've already booked in and paid. The first class is commencing next week, and I am doing a second class of the same subject matter, which is Venus and the Venus star point, and I will contact all of you regarding the date for that very soon in the next few days. It's probably going to be either on the 23rd of November or it might be in the first week of December. I haven't quite decided, so leave that with me and I'll get back to all of you. But thanks to all of you who have expressed interest and who have booked in as well. I'm really excited. I've got a really jam-packed, awesome class prepared for you guys. So really looking forward to sharing that space with you. So thanks again for expressing your interest. Okay, so it's been quite an intense period, to say the least. And yes, it's been like that all year, but I guess as we're approaching pretty much the end of the year, relative to the movement of the planets at the moment, things are sort of accelerating even more, I think, particularly since Mars is now stationary direct and Mercury just recently moved back into Scorpio, which was an interesting experience for me personally. So this new moon in Scorpio is going to be, I think, probably a very, very intense journey, if you like, relative to a new moon journey. And it's going to come down to our own personal desires, our own willingness, our own willpower, in terms of what we wish to do with this energy and all the energies surrounding the new moon as well. This new moon is actually being aspected in quite a positive way by Jupiter and Pluto, and Saturn really we could throw in there, and of course Pallas Athena. There is also a Venus square Pluto in this chart, so that's a theme that's carrying through, and this new moon is also conjunct the asteroid goddess Juno, and she was there opposite the full moon a couple of weeks ago when we had the full moon in Taurus. So the goddesses are very active at this time, which I think is a very not a coincidental thing. Nothing is coincidence anyway. Coincidence is literally, when you break that word down, it is two events or two things coming together at the same space and same time, because that's just what they were supposed to do, just to put it very simply. So coincidence is not what we typically perceive it to be. It's supposed to be, right? So these goddesses that are very active at the moment on the earth plane, let's say, in terms of their frequency being filtered through into our consciousness, is very much to do with the divine feminine, the feminine power and principle within all of us, whether you're a man or a woman. Feminine does not, it doesn't imply gender, because every man and woman has the feminine and masculine components within them. But the feminine is basically, she's transforming. She's reviving herself. She's speaking very, very strongly. And we can see that just through the different goddesses that are very active at the moment, even during the last full moon. Just to step back into a smaller picture rather than the larger picture, the last full moon in Taurus, there were several goddess asteroids that were very active with that full moon. And in this particular new moon cycle, as I said, we have Juno conjunct the new moon, and the goddess Eris, E-R-I-S, who's been very dynamic and very active through 2020 relative to her square to Pluto, which is basically the experience that we've had of reality as we see it before us. Eris corresponds to chaos and destruction. and waking people up from their slumber, from their deep slumber. So she's quite a I suppose a goddess who is not of the softer sort of energy. She's I sort of think about her very similar to Kali, the Hindu goddess, which when you look at the images of Kali, that they can be quite aggressive, quite scary in some instances, but it's just about understanding her, the archetype of Kali and the symbolism to that, which is about destruction in order to bring about new beginnings, right? So that's what the earth has been encountering all year, to say the least. And so Eris is actually forming and in conjunct to this new moon. So she's speaking quite strongly to this new moon. I'll go into that as I bring up the chart. I also want to address that this new moon, I'd like to think about it also from the esoteric level, right? So esoterically, Scorpio is ruled by Mars. Now, in traditional exoteric astrology, Mars is also the ruler of Scorpio, but we also have Pluto, right? So when we're talking about esoteric astrology, whether you understand it or not, or whether you use that model or not, esoteric astrology is just a way to help us understand and connect with the division, you could say, of soul and personality. So it's always aimed at actually aligning the soul with the personality. And that's one of the biggest matters in life, you could say, that's a real issue, because there's so much discord, right? With humanity relative to just being very identified with their personality. And that's not a judgment, that's not a right or wrong, it's just how it is. But for those of us, or those of you who are seeking to evolve consciously, and to do your shadow work, to be totally authentic and honest, then when we're talking about a new moon in Scorpio, we're talking about getting the magnifying glass out, the zoom lens, and looking very deeply into our own nature, into our own unconscious, into our shadow components, into our dark side. We all have a dark side, so for somebody to say they don't have a shadow side or a dark side, to me is just a position of denial. And as a result of that, what happens to that person's shadow and dark side, it just gets projected onto everybody around them. And so hence what you see, instead of owning your own dark side, as it were, shadow self, which is the unconscious components within you, they just get projected onto everyone around you and everything around you. So everybody out there becomes the enemy, or the bad person, or the dark person, etc., etc. And so it's always important for us to first of all understand that we've come into the physical body to have a particular experience for the purposes of our own evolution, and we make a huge sacrifice from the soul level by incarnating into this dense reality where we take on this physical body and we are surrounded by physical form. And it kind of initially separates us from the higher self, the light, as it were, until we kind of work our way through that, and find a way to create the realignment, not just for our own self, but for our service and our work that we do here on the planet for all of humanity. Because even though we are here to evolve personally relative to our soul's evolutionary plan and desires and so forth, we are also here to unite and to integrate together. So everything we do impacts, it impacts the world. We impact each other. We're not here alone on the planet. If it was just one soul on the planet, then that'd be a different thing. But there's 8 billion of us, right? So we're all here in this together, okay? So we need to always remember that we are evolving from our own soul's process, but that also includes how we create ripple effects towards each other and the planet herself. So new moon in Scorpio is a very powerful opportunity to bring us closer to working with our shadow material, working with the integration of the soul and the personality, because the integration of the soul and the personality, the sense that I get about that is that we would work for probably, I don't know how many lifetimes to really cultivate that connection and that relationship. And everyone is at a different stage, right? And look, a new moon in Scorpio is just it's a very powerful new moon, but it's a small part of the picture relative to all the layers of everything else that's actually going on with all the other planets, right? So what I might do is just bring up the chart for this new moon so we can just have a look at it together. So this chart is based on Melbourne, Australian Eastern Standard Time, and that's not correct because we're on daylight saving. So let me just edit that to get the time zone correct. We're on 11 hours at the moment. There we go. So that's pretty good. It's in the 9th house for us here in Melbourne. Okay, so don't worry about where everything is, because this is going to change based on your location, right? Now you can see here, there's the new moon. I might just get it to exactness. It's changed because I just changed the time zone. So just bear with me while I just adjust this. There we go. So 23:17. Okay. So we're back in the 8th house. Interesting. All right. So the sun and the moon together, that creates a new moon. This is not a solar eclipse. A solar eclipse is a sun-moon conjunction, but with the nodes, right? We have one of those coming up very soon, actually. I'll do a separate video for that. Now here's Mercury. Recently, just a couple of days ago, it went back into Scorpio. As we know, Mercury was retrograde, went right back into Libra. He's made his way back into Scorpio. We have Mars in Aries, which is now stationary direct. We have Pluto at 22 degrees of Capricorn forming a sextile to this new moon, which is quite positive. Jupiter is also sextile this new moon. However, the the North Node is forming an inconjunct to the new moon. Eris, she is here, she also forms an inconjunct to the new moon. So, really that's a yod, okay? So we have a yod between the new moon, the North Node, and Eris. And we could actually throw Mars into this picture as well. Some might say that's too far away, and perhaps it is, but if it was in effect, we'll certainly know about it. The new moon is always obviously a new beginning of a new cycle, as we all understand, and it is a really important time to plant some seeds, to create some new intentions, just to start new things in your life, however big or small that may be. It just depends on you, right? But with Scorpio, we're really always asked to be totally honest, totally honest with where we are, where we stand at the moment, relative to our own feelings, the relationship we have with ourselves, our own personal limitations, which corresponds to Scorpio in the 8th house as well, and our desires and the will, okay? But the will coming more from the soul, because Pluto and Scorpio correspond to the mutation and evolution of the soul, right? The metamorphosis. So we have a really powerful agent of transformation speaking through this new moon. And it can be a very powerful time if you're wanting to really cleanse and purge yourself of certain things. That can be internal and or external. Just depends what you're working on, what's going on in your life, how you decide to work with this energy. Some key words for Scorpio, just for those of you that might be relatively new to astrology. Scorpio exposes what's hidden. So that the hidden aspects connect to the unconscious components within us, our shadow components, that can become very distorted, hence projected outside of ourselves when we are not integrating. And integration means really being very honest with everything inside yourself that you can understand or see or connect to. And some things we're not going to like, no one's an absolute saint, right? We've all sinned, just to use those kind of terms. So we all have aspects within ourselves that we are either not aware of, in denial of, suppressing, completely unconscious about. And when we are working with the pure intention of wanting to really align ourselves with our highest will, Pluto, soul, that requires total, brutal honesty. And when Scorpio comes into the picture, that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with brutal honesty. It's the deep dive into the soul's desires, into the window of the soul, into the heart of the soul, and really checking out what's there, right? And what you're ready to work on. So a new moon is, you're not going to see the results, on the day of the new moon, but the process and the energy of a new moon is where you can make the choices, set the intentions of what it is you really wish to purge yourself of, cleanse yourself of, and what sort of limitations do you have within your own psychic structure that you might now be ready to really examine, look at, and be honest about, and it could just be one thing, and it could be the smallest thing. It doesn't matter. It's not defined by small or big, good or bad. It's that those words are very, very limiting, because everyone's journey is very sacred and very special, regardless of what anybody else's perspective is relating to that. Scorpio connects to shared resources as well. It's the 8th house, right? So it's our shared resources, which can be on a physical, material level, and of course at a much deeper level, it's our you could say the transaction that we make with another person on an emotional, psychological, spiritual, and sexual level as well. Scorpio correlates to renewing oneself, It can also correspond to experiences of abandonment and betrayal. It can also correspond to power and powerlessness, matters of manipulation, control, secrets being revealed and so forth. It's also an energy that corresponds to the priestess type of energy. Many of you beautiful goddesses here on the earth plane have a priestess connection or vibration about you. So this is a really powerful time to tap into that part within you. And let me just say that this can also correspond to men and guys as well, because like I said, We all have the feminine and masculine within us, you know. So it doesn't matter what our gender is. We can connect with a masculine deity, or, you know, a feminine deity or deity. It doesn't really matter. Scorpio is also about the process of alchemy, deep alchemical work that we can do from the soul level. So you can see here there's a rich template or ground that we can really step into if we so choose. Also with Scorpio, it is my experience that when you have, for example, a Pluto transit, and you survive it and you come out the other end of it, you know what it means to really have a Scorpio experience, to really have a deep soul life death type of experience. Now, I've said this before, we die every night when we go to sleep. That's a death process, you know, because we totally surrender and we go into Neptune. That's what surrender corresponds to Neptune. When you go to sleep, you don't control what happens in your sleep, your breath, you know, all those things. We just let go because we have to, right? That's a Scorpio Pluto type of experience. So when we're dealing with Scorpio energy, what I'm trying to get at is that we can't expect to cleanse ourselves and to purge ourselves and to transmute or transform or let go, right, of something that we are ready to let go of in order to create the new space for something new to come in. We cannot go through that process without dying to something. Now, that could be dying to an idea, to a relationship, to a work position, to whatever it may be. It can be a number of different external things, and it can also be an inner journey, right? And the inner journeys are incredibly deep, complex, and can be very challenging on an emotional and psychological level, you know, but we can have things in place that can really help us with that process as well. And one thing is to be really kind and compassionate to ourselves. If we can't be kind and compassionate to ourselves through our own dark night of the soul type of experience, or when we're doing shadow work, or when we're trying to be really brutally honest with what it is we need to further work on, if we can't give that compassion to ourselves and that kindness to ourselves, how can we give it to anybody else out there? You know, it always comes back to what we give to ourselves, we give to others as well. It's as simple as that, you know. Scorpio is a fixed sign in terms of quality, and it's a water sign, right? So water always takes us into the domain of the soul, whether it's Cancer, Scorpio, or Pisces. But certainly Scorpio, from an evolutionary model or perspective, Scorpio specifically correlates to the soul. I just would like to read this to you. So in esoteric astrology, Pluto rules Pisces, which, you know, it's a very different way of thinking about Pluto, and it can be very confusing for one who hasn't explored esoteric astrology. Okay. But Pluto is connected to the first ray number 1. There are 7 rays in esoteric astrology. Ray 1 it really is one of the most powerful rays, because it's the ray of the will. Okay. And when you have ray 1 at the soul ray, for instance, there's a profound, incredibly profound and powerful vibration and essence emanating from your beingness, from your being, relative to the soul's desires. I've seen a lot of different people who have ray 1 either at the soul or personality level. They're usually very powerful people in their life in terms of how they influence and impact the world or people around them. It's one of the most powerful rays. It can also bring about incredible conflict and power struggles, which is what corresponds to Pluto anyway. Now, Mars in esoteric astrology, and I'm bringing this up because Mars is very prominent at this time, having gone retrograde in Aries, being in Aries for around about 5 months, I think it is in total. Pluto sextile this new moon in Scorpio, Mercury in Scorpio, Eris, which is about she's the goddess of discord and destruction, another Pluto type of energy, but coming from a feminine level. So in other words, what we're seeing here is a chart with energy that's very Scorpio, Pluto, Mars, Aries-like, right? And those energies are very difficult energies because they create conflict, they create tension, they create death and rebirth, transformation, change, power struggles. They're very confronting. They're not soft feminine energies at all. They're very, very confronting. And that's really what we're dealing with collectively as well. I mean, collectively at the moment, there are different things going on in different countries relative to this pandemic situation. For us here in Melbourne, Australia, for instance, we are no longer in lockdown. Everything opened up almost 2 weeks ago. Life is pretty much back to normal, and we've got no cases at all, no cases of contraction and no cases of death. It's a bit of a mystery to me, really, how that can suddenly just happen, given this virus is still alive and active. That's another story, another conversation perhaps. And I know that there is immense turmoil in the USA at the moment, politically and also relative to the pandemic. England's going through pretty tough times as well. So it's the chaos, the crisis has actually no way near ended, and in different parts of the earth plane it's going to go on for longer, clearly, right? So that's a whole other level. But what I'm getting at is that these energies that we're seeing right now, Mars in Aries moving direct, so there's this desire and sense from all of us, right, really wanting to move ahead, to step into kind of like the next phase, right, to sort of take some action towards things. And it's pretty tough because with Scorpio, Mars, Aries, Pluto, it's very dynamic energy. It's a very dynamic frequency. It's incredibly intense and confronting, as I said, and it does stir up in all of us our own personal desires and our own personal desires relative to wanting to express our own will, take action towards things. Sometimes that can be appropriate, sometimes it can be inappropriate. That can also connect to our words, Mercury and Scorpio. Scorpio connects to venom. So people can be quite poisonous with their words and their thoughts and their perceptions and what they project onto other people as well. That these are just aspects of the archetypes that are rising into the collective unconsciousness. The new moon being sextile by Pluto is very promising because a sextile aspect, it corresponds to a few different things, but one thing it does correspond to is opportunity. It's a soft aspect. It brings flow, it brings connection, it brings ease, and it enables energies to work together very harmoniously. So given Pluto is the ruler of Scorpio, that's a really positive thing for us to have Pluto forming a sextile to the new moon, and Jupiter is also forming a sextile to the new moon, and those two of course are conjunct, and they've started a new cycle in terms of their own conjunction together, which is going to unfold over years down the track. This is just the beginning, right? And of course we're going to see a very important shift and change when both Jupiter and Saturn ingress into Aquarius around the solstice time in December, and I will do a video on that because I have many things I'd like to share about that. But regardless, Pluto and Jupiter forming a sextile to this new moon is very encouraging. Pluto and Jupiter as a combination together is a very powerful energy, and that can be very positive in terms of positive change, but it can also raise a lot of tension and conflict in the environment as well, okay? Because there'll be a lot of people that won't be on board with the powerful transformations that are basically coming through, whether we like it or not. Pallas Athena is there as well, you know, exactly conjunct Jupiter at the moment. So there's another aspect of the feminine speaking very strongly. She's also forming a sextile to this new moon. Juno is conjunct the new moon. So there's two goddesses strongly aspecting this new moon. The feminine voice. Pallas Athena is about clear seeing. Now, here's an important point. The new moon is forming an inconjunct to the North Node in Gemini. Now, an inconjunct has many different layers, and I'd just do a whole class, and I probably will, because I intend to do so many classes for you guys, and it will end up being like a 4 or 5 year course. That's what it'll end up being, all right? But I'm just not doing it in a style of a curriculum starting from A to Z. I'm just going to bring up different material as I go along, and you will jump on board when that particular subject and class appeals to you, and I'm happy for people to do that. So there's nobody has to commit to any long term of anything, okay? So I've created it in a very flexible way for you guys and a flexible way for myself as well. So the inconjunct aspect relative to this new moon and the North Node, the transiting North Node, which is the moon's transiting North Node, is speaking to the direction that we are heading into relative to new information being born, Gemini. The inconjunct that this North Node is forming to this new moon is going to, for some of us at least, will bring up some matters around having to, whatever it is we're wanting to deeply dive into, Scorpio, be totally honest about, really examine and look at and purge, transform, die to, etc. That process is going to be influenced by the North Node. So the way it's going to connect is that something that we've been thinking about, you could say, we're going to be asked to adjust our thinking towards that. Now that could be to a person, a situation, a belief, a family member, a relationship, a political system, whatever, right? It's I can't say what it's going to be for you because I'm not you. But what I can say is that there is something about your own inner process of thoughts regarding what it is you're wanting to totally release or change, mutate in some kind of way. You will have to adjust your thinking to it, the way you thought about it previously. That's one component. Or it can be that you completely drop a particular perspective, idea, and thought you had on a situation, person, etc. Okay, so that's the influence of the North Node. So it's either changing your mind about something altogether and just dropping it, or adjusting your thinking to it. Okay, and just so think about that relative to being connected to the new moon in Scorpio. As I said, Pluto is forming a sextile, so that's quite supportive. It's really helpful in our own personal evolutionary journey and our own personal transformation, right, relative to this new moon in Scorpio. Neptune is forming a trine to the new moon, so that's also really nice, soft, supportive aspect. A trine is very similar to a sextile. It just simply speaks to energies flowing together harmoniously. So we have an aspect here being spoken through Neptune relative to the new moon, and Neptune corresponds to how we can surrender. How can we surrender to something higher other than ourselves. So that's what that brings in for us, the ability to surrender to well, I would say the ultimate truth, the highest truth. Now, truth is a pathless land, as Krishnamurti once said. And that just simply means that my truth is different to your truth, and your truth is different to your neighbor's truth. And that's the case for pretty much all of us here as human physical beings on the planet, right? But when it comes to the ultimate truth, there is only one truth, and that is actually experienced and understood and or seen through Neptune. So Neptune always can bring the opportunity for us to connect and transcend that part of ourselves that is perhaps attached, right, to the form and the reality, and let go, surrender, and transcend into something within ourselves that really connects to the divine truth, ultimate truth, right? So that's a beautiful aspect, forming a trine to that moon. As I said, Eris is in conjunct this new moon. So, you know, look, that's a pretty, I wouldn't say that's favorable. I would say that's actually quite challenging, you know, but Eris has been speaking to 2020 full stop. So we haven't seen the end of Eris yet, particularly because Pluto is at, well, it's a few minutes away from being 23 degrees. A few minutes for Pluto, that can be a few weeks, okay, in terms of Earth time. So Eris has been a prominent figure in 2020, as well as Pluto. And so Eris and Pluto are squaring each other and have been all year, okay? So that's just there anyway as a background, a bigger picture background sort of theme. Now, Mars, as I said, you know, we're talking about energies here represented by this new moon and all the energies in the chart. Apart from the trine from Neptune, everything else is pretty dynamic, pretty confronting, can bring about a lot of conflict, whether that's within ourselves or with others and so forth, you know. And it will, but we have the choice to step back and check in with ourselves in terms of our behavior, in terms of our choices, in terms of our perceptions. You know, it's we can see so much going on out there, and it's so overwhelming. This whole pandemic thing has been so overwhelming. It's so Neptune and Pluto. Pluto connects to viruses. The Neptune, you know, in Pisces, it's been a spectacular feature in this whole year. Unfortunately, it's come through a lot of confusion, and what has also appeared as either deception or lies or disillusionment, right? Disappointment. Neptune at the lower personality level corresponds to disappointment, because when Neptune is projected onto a situation, a person or persons, it will only most likely disappoint you, because nobody in the human form can embody the complete vibration of Neptune and represent that in its totality, because that's the divine source creation is that. So we are an aspect of the divine source creation to all things, but we are not it. We are an aspect of it. So in this physical form, as an aspect of the divine source creation to all things, we are expressing, you know, through this vehicle, through our personality. And if we are just expressing at the personality level, we are not infusing the soul. We've disconnected. I mean, we can never disconnect with our soul, let me be clear. But in terms of the physical encounter and experience, the personality can be so dominating because of the nature of reality, because of the nature of this physical earth plane. It is so personality dominated and orientated. So it is very easy for us to lose sight of or lose connection with our soul, you know, and just be totally driven and motivated by the personality. So whether it's whatever new moon it is or whatever full moon it is, in my opinion, it always comes back to some kind of opportunity to work with ourselves, to improve on ourselves, to integrate, to confront, to align, to prepare, to cleanse, to purge. And certainly with a new moon in Scorpio, this process is just completely amplified if we're wanting to work with a new moon energy. Okay, I think that's basically it, but just I just want to read you something about Mars from the esoteric level, and this is just a good thing to think of relative to Mars in your own natal chart and also just transiting Mars as well. So as I said, Mars is the ruler of Scorpio in both esoteric and exoteric astrology. Now, in esoteric astrology, relative to the 7 rays, Mars rules the 6th ray, okay? And the 6th ray is one of the trickiest rays to deal with, okay? The 6th ray actually is ruled by Neptune and Mars, okay? So it's a really, that combination of Mars-Neptune, it has so many different faces, but when it's operating at the personality level, it's it can be the person who's really charismatic and magnetic and really appealing and just has a way with things and people, you know, is really kind of has an energy about them that can they can hypnotize you, right? It's a very powerful energy. But when it's working with the intentions of harming, it can be incredibly harmful. You know, Mars Neptune would correspond to human beings that are fanatical about religion and take the position that their religion is the only right religion and everybody else is wrong. So let's now kill everybody else because they don't believe this. That's Mars Neptune working at the lowest level through the personality. And it comes through the esoteric stuff as well, because Mars Neptune connecting to race 6, it has got very much to do with spiritual ideologies. And when it's operating in a very toxic, dysfunctioning way, it's incredibly destructive. But Mars, on the esoteric level, it's the desire for physical incarnation. So think about the esoteric level is the soul incarnating into this physical body. So Mars at the esoteric level connects to the desire, because Mars is desires, as is Pluto. Mars is the lower desires, Pluto is the highest desires, right? Or highest will, lower will, right? But everything has its place. There's no good or bad, right or wrong in any of these energies, in any of the planets. So let me just continue reading. So the esoteric level is for Mars, it's the desire for physical incarnation, right? That brings us in. It's that desire to bring us in. Hence the rulership over Aries, right? The personality and physical level. It's here on the personality level that Mars reveals itself as a vehicle for sacrifice. And so the 6th ray corresponds to sacrifice. That's why Mars and Neptune are there as the 2 planetary rulers for 6th ray, right? Sacrifice is Neptune, and the action that we take towards a sacrifice is Mars, right? As it is through physical incarnation that the soul is seen as descending into matter, form, and thus sacrificing. So that's saying that once we come into this physical vehicle, this physical reality, we've sacrificed something to come in here and take this physicality on. That within itself is some kind of sacrifice relative to the soul. Let me just continue reading. An aspect, descending and thus sacrificing, an aspect of itself for life in the denser physical world. It is that process which evokes the death of an aspect of one's higher self, which is what I just said a moment ago. So that manifestation in the three worlds of the lower self is made possible. This is the mortification of the soul and the willing sacrifice of the light, which is love, so that it may be born into the world of man and thus be of benefit to humanity. This descent into matter is part of each of our paths, which is what I was saying at the very beginning when I basically said that our own personal evolution and growth and development is, totally synced in and tied into our own soul. Okay, that's one level of our journey here, but another level of our journey corresponds and connects to the entirety of all beings, of the whole earth, because we're not just here alone as a singular soul person. There's a human race here, an entire family, a collective family. And in truth, at the highest level, at the soul level, we are all brothers and sisters. All of us are brothers and sisters, and we all come from the same point, the same spark. So when we're up there in somewhere and we are, let's say, at the frequency of the soul and not incarnate into the body, we remember that, we know that, and we have that deep love, respect, and compassion and sense of unity. There is no separation at all. It is the human form, the being born into this reality, that creates the division and the separation. And so we're like all these billions of little lights on the earth, right? And we're all just swimming through Neptune, this collective ocean. And we're just trying to reconnect, and we're just trying to find our way. And it's really beautiful to me when I think about that, because that actually helps me remember myself to be more compassionate, to be more empathetic if I can be. I feel like I am very compassionate and very empathetic. That's just my very nature. But I can still improve on that, and I can improve on many things, just like all of us can, and that's why we're here. But if we can step back, no matter what's going on, and no matter what we are personally working on, and this new moon in Scorpio is a powerful reminder of this, right? When we step back and just envision that every single human being is a soul, which is a spark of light, consciousness, and all of us light up the earth together in our darkest moments, in our highest light moments. In fact, I think Rumi, the poet Rumi, has a beautiful quote. I can't remember it, so I can't even summarize. Well, I can summarize it. It's something about that. It's like in your darkest moment, when you're going through some really deep soul lessons, journeys, transformations, pain, wounding, when you're going through those deep sort of moments, which some might say is the dark night of the soul, which is very misleading, because that implies that we only might encounter that experience one night of our life, and that's just total rubbish, because when you go through a Pluto process, that can sometimes go on for years, not just one night. So it should just be rechanged. Anyway, Rumi says that it is that pain and that darker sort of experience, that's when we are really highly lit, actually, at a vibratory level, which is probably very different to what a lot of other schools of thought say. They say, you've got to keep, raising your vibration, raising your frequency and so forth. And yes, I do agree with that. But there is something very sacred and very powerful relative to the soul and the spark of consciousness of that soul and its darkest nights or moments. There's something very beautiful about that. But we've not learnt to perceive it in those ways or to think about those things in those ways. It's like a simple example is if you're walking down the street and you go to a shop and someone says, "How are you?" No one expects you to really tell them how you actually are. They just want to say, they just want to hear you say, "Yeah, I'm fine, thanks, how are you?" Bang, see you later. No one expects you to pour out your heart and your soul. No one's got time for that. So, anyway. So really I just wanted to wrap it up with saying that if we can always remember through our own personal journey, as it's unfolding, moment to moment, there is no right or wrong in it, and everyone is fighting their own battle. Everyone has got their own cross to bear. It doesn't matter who it is. So compassion, kindness to ourselves, so that therefore we can embody that, to everybody else around us. So that's a pretty positive note to end this session on. Let me just see if there was anything else here. Ceres has gone back into Pisces. That's quite interesting as well, because she was in Pisces and retrograded back into Aquarius, right? And has just recently, just a few days ago, went back into Pisces. So we've got more on a collective level. I think that there is more to experience relative to the loss of perhaps certain dreams we had, certain ideals we had about our own life and about life itself. And whilst that sounds like that's not a nice thing, it's not about it being good or bad, nice or whatever. It's really about understanding that we are at a time in history, in life, in consciousness, where new realities must be born. For something new to be born, something old has to die. It's always... Sorry, I'll just let this amber go by. It's always about that, it's always about that. If we give birth to something new, or something else has died, has gone. And Pluto is a powerful reminder of that. But the Venus star point is a very powerful body that actually brings in the birth. And I'll talk about this during my Venus class, because the Venus star point, her return from, if you think about the Venus star point as being the head, the two arms and the legs, the pentagram, from the head to one arm, for the Venus star point to do all her revolutions and to get from this point to this arm, that takes 250 years. So you see, that corresponds to Pluto's cycle, which is 248 years. I'll talk about that in the Venus class. But Ariel Gutman made a really valid and interesting point. She said that Pluto is the death, but the Venus star point is the rebirth. And so Pluto, which is acting as this agent of transformation and change, both collectively and personally, corresponds to this larger cycle where we're not seeing it every single day, except when we have a year like 2020. And Venus likewise is like another clock, you could say, a celestial clock that is vibrating and projecting her energy relative to her cycle, and therefore what that means for us collectively and individually relative to our own charts. So the new moon, which is really powerful because we're talking about the lunar goddess, one of the celestial bodies that it's the brightest luminary in the sky other than the sun, and then of course it's Venus, right? So but getting back to the moon, lunar feminine, divine feminine, whether you're a man or a woman, it doesn't matter. So it's a lunar energy, it's a new moon, it's a new cycle that can assist in the larger cycles of things that are going on. The new moon in Scorpio is not going to change your life. If your life does change in a profound way that corresponds to this new moon in Scorpio, it will be because there are a number of other different things going on in your chart that are all coming into effect at around about the same time. So yeah, I'll leave it there. Okay, I'm off. I've got so much work to do. I'll see you guys next week for Venus, Venus Star Point, all those of you that have signed up. And I'm sending out a new email for the second class, so look out for that. And sending you all so much love and so much blessings. And even though we're in still incredibly trying times, let's just try and be kind to each other. Much love. Bye.